The rain had started without warning, a cold, relentless drizzle that blurred the city skyline into streaks of silver and grey. Inside the glass tower that pierced through the clouds, a meeting room sat wrapped in quiet tension. The sound of droplets tapping against the massive windows was the only thing keeping the silence alive. And in that silence, one moment would change everything. She stood by the long mahogany table, clutching a folded piece of paper in trembling hands. Her green maid uniform looked out of place amid the suits, watches, and sleek devices that gleamed under the warm overhead lights. Her name was Alina Zhang, 26, reserved, graceful, with the kind of quiet presence that went unnoticed until now. Across the table sat Richard Holden, a millionaire businessman in his late 40s, confident and polished, the kind of man who carried arrogance like a fragrance. Around him, his executives sat in anticipation, smirking as if the next few moments would provide them with some private entertainment. On the surface, this was a regular meeting, but for Alina, it was an ambush disguised as a joke. Richard had spotted her earlier in the hallway, dusting the corners of the conference room before the board meeting. The executives were joking about a foreign letter that had arrived from one of their overseas partners, written entirely in Mandarin. None of them could read it. One of them, half mocking, said, "Why don't we ask the maid? Maybe she can translate it." Richard, amused, decided to play along. He called her in, the laughter echoing as he waved the document like bait. "Translate this," he said, leaning back in his chair with a smirk. "And my salary is yours." The room erupted in laughter. To them, it was just a joke, a test, a way to pass time at someone else's expense. But to Alina, it wasn't funny. It was cruel. If you believe every story hides a lesson, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Pawsitive Tales. Her hands tightened around the paper. The black ink was faded but familiar. She didn't even need to look twice to know what language it was. Mandarin, her mother tongue. A language she had buried deep inside her, along with the pain of everything she had lost. Years ago, Alina had been a top student at the University of Guangzhou, studying literature and linguistics. Her dream was to become a translator for global organizations, to bridge cultures with words. But when her father's small import business went bankrupt after a fire destroyed their inventory, and later took his life when he tried to save it, her dreams were reduced to ashes too. She moved to the United States to survive, not to live. And like many who come searching for light, she found only long hours, low wages, and the kind of invisibility that makes you forget your own worth. Now, standing in that conference room, she could feel the weight of all those years pressing down on her again. The men stared, waiting for her to fail, to stutter, to admit she couldn't read it, to give them a reason to laugh louder. But instead, Alina unfolded the paper with calm, deliberate grace. She began to read. Her voice was soft at first, the kind of voice that seemed to tremble under the gaze of power. But with every line it grew stronger, richer, more certain. The words flowed from her like music, like something ancient returning to life. The document was not a business letter. It was an old Chinese poem, written by a philosopher centuries ago. A reflection on life, pride, and humility. It spoke of a wise teacher writing to his arrogant student. You will learn that wealth builds walls around the heart, but kindness tears them down. The one who listens learns more than the one who commands, and the river does not boast of its strength, yet it carries the mountains to the sea. The air in the room changed. The laughter died. The executives who had leaned back now sat forward, caught in her words. Her voice echoed through the glass, carrying something pure and ancient. Even Richard, who moments ago had looked at her as nothing more than a maid, now stared unmoving. When she finished, Alina lowered the paper, her eyes meeting his. The silence that followed was heavier than the rain outside. "It says," she said quietly, "that arrogance blinds the wise, and kindness teaches the proud." No one dared to speak. Richard's hand twitched. His smirk had vanished completely. He stared at her, really stared, as if seeing her for the first time. The suit, the money, the pride, all of it seemed small now, like armor cracking from the inside. Then slowly he reached for his pen. "You've earned it," he muttered, scribbling something on his checkbook. He tore the check out and slid it across the table. 20,400. But Alina didn't touch it. Her face remained calm, her eyes steady. "I don't need your salary," she said softly. "I just needed you to understand the meaning of those words." She placed the letter back on the table, bowed slightly, a gesture of respect, not submission, and turned toward the door. Her steps were steady, each one echoing through the marble hall like the rhythm of dignity itself. When she left, no one spoke for a long time. The rain had stopped. Sunlight filtered through the clouds, spilling warmth across the floor. Richard sat there, staring at the check he had written, feeling an unfamiliar ache inside him, not guilt, but realization. The kind that humbles a man who thought he'd already learned everything. That evening, he found himself alone in his office, holding the letter again. He ran his fingers over the fragile paper, tracing the characters. He didn't understand the language, but somehow he understood the meaning. He placed it in a glass frame and hung it on the wall behind his desk. Beneath it, he wrote a single English phrase, "True power speaks quietly." Weeks passed. Alina didn't return to work. She had resigned the next day. But one morning a letter arrived at her small apartment. It bore the company's seal and Richard's signature. Inside, there was no check, no apology, only an offer. He was starting a new cultural division for international projects, and he wanted her to lead it as their head translator and consultant. The final line of the letter was written in Mandarin. "True respect," it said, "is the greatest salary." Tears filled her eyes, not out of weakness, but relief, the kind that comes when the world finally sees you for who you are. She folded the letter, held it close to her chest, and whispered something her father once told her. The value of a person is not in what they earn, but in what they carry in their heart. That day, the rain began again, soft, steady, cleansing. But this time, it didn't sound lonely. If this story made you feel something, whether it was hope, sadness, or quiet strength, let us know in the comments. Your words matter more than you think. Comment below, what do you think the ancient letter truly meant? If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Pawsitive Tales, where every story finds its soul, one heart at a time.